an overview of my presidential theme. And I'll also cover the current social and economic challenges that our country is facing. And some of the things that I believe we need to do, like rebuilding our institution, the challenges we have in education and how can we overcome that, youth entrepreneurship, and as Vishal has mentioned as well, I'll also talk about ethical leadership and some conclusion. The next slide. My screen is not moving.
Okay. Should I maybe try sharing, and then you can just tell me when you're ready to move on to the next screen?
Okay, that can also work.
Okay. Refiwe Lidiha, if you can help, please stop sharing.
Okay. Can I? Yeah. Maybe let me try and share again and see how it goes.
Okay.
Let me try that. Show. There we go. I think it's going through now. Okay. So in terms of my presidential theme, these are the 4 key pillars that I wanted us to focus on in this year. The first one is about education. I shared this thing at the inauguration last November. Youth entrepreneurship, procurement, and leadership. So these are some of the challenges that we actually are having in the country, and we need to find solutions for them. And all of them, they are supported by governance and ethics. And that is basically the focus of my theme, and I'll be talking a lot more on them as I go along. Before I continue into much more detail, I want to just touch a bit about the challenges that we face in terms of the COVID-19 in our country. While it is a challenge on its own, my view as well is it is presenting opportunities for us to perhaps think out of the box and come with solutions in terms of how we need to overcome these challenges. I see this slide here is the old one. I'm hoping that the right presentation was given to me. But the point I want to make in this slide is that something we need to focus on is what is called the case fatality rate. To a large extent, we're looking just at the numbers. I think the numbers now, they're sitting around 525,000 people who are affected by the COVID-19. And at this point in time, I think the number of deaths is sitting somewhere around 9,000 people. So if you look at that ratio alone, it's working around 1.6, 1.7. So that's something that we need to look at. Just to say that this ratio, if we compare it with other countries around the world, it is not bad as it looks. So if we look at India, we look at Brazil, and we look at the US, for example, their numbers are quite higher. So there's a bit of hope in our country in terms of the situation that we are facing. So we need to be a bit positive about that. However, we need to make use of this opportunity to come with policies that will turn this situation around in our country. I think Mr. Issa talks about opportunities that exist in Sandal, in the supply of material, supply of aggregate. Those are some of the opportunities that we can think about to say, as government, what are the policies that we can put in place to try and fast track the economic development of our people? What can we do to try and empower people such that they can be involved and partake in the infrastructure rollout that everyone is talking about? Ramukhoba at the SITSA symposium in June this year, they unpack some of the projects that are there in the country. So we need to find ways of actually rolling out those projects for the empowerment of everybody. Something that I'm also passionate about is just looking at economic indicators. If one looks at the GDP performance since 1994, you will see that the trend is actually going downwards on this curve here. So if you compare 1994 and you compare where we are now in around 2019, 2020, you will see that the curve is going down. But something I want to you guys to pay attention to is this period here around 2004, 2006, when the economy was growing at the rate of 5.6%. And during this period, actually in 2006, the unemployment rate itself was around 22.6%. And you have heard earlier in June, when the Minister of Finance talked about the current unemployment rate, a figure of 30.1% was mentioned in Q1 of 2020. This number is there at Stats SA. So you can see the numbers. The lowest we have achieved so far is a figure of 16.9%. This is in 1995, and this is more or less where we should be, where the unemployment rate is lower than 20%. So if we can get it below 20%, maybe one day, if possible, even get it below 10%, that would be wonderful for our country. And for us to do that, I think most of us will remember the target by the National Development Plan. It talks about a figure of 5.4%. So if we can get the economy to grow at the rate of 5.4%, that would be good. This is what I've plotted here as the what-if path. This is the path that I'm asking myself, why can't we be here as a country? Why can't our economy grow at the rate of 5% or at least above 3% for the benefit of everyone? So I plotted this curve to say, this is my dream. This is where I wish things to be. And if you like, you can call it the Fana path, if you so wish. And my belief is this is what we should be working on, and hopefully one day we will get to that. Now, if you look at the fiscal outlook for the local economy, you will see that in the year 2007, 2008, the budget that we have, the revenue and the expenditures, they were very close to one another. So the amount of money that the fiscus was collecting was very close to the expenditure that the government was having. But now, if you look at the trend, just look at the gap now where we are in the year 2020-21. The gap has widened so much, and this is unsustainable. We cannot have a situation where the amount of money that we collect is way higher than the budget, is way higher than the revenue that we're able to collect. So the expenditure and the revenue have to match. And if they don't match, and we keep on borrowing, because we must spend this money, if we keep on borrowing, we are essentially increasing the burden on our kids. Our future children are the ones who are going to be paying this debt. So it's something that we need to find ways to arrest. As we have had, there will be a shortfall of 304 billion rands in this financial year, because largely due to the challenges of COVID-19 and some other initiative that government has got. So it is important that, yes, this is something that needs to happen. However, we need to be cautious in terms of the level of debt that we need to incur for our country. We hear from National Treasury that the level of debt will grow to something in the order of 80, at some stage, about 85% of our GDP. And those levels are quite high, and they're quite unsustainable. So we need to do all we can to try and minimize that. Now, if you look at the next graph, this graph compares the income that our country collects. We're comparing two components of the income, the households and just the corporations. You will see that around 1995, 96, 97, the household's income was very high, while the corporate was low, but it was growing steadily. It was growing and the households were coming down. And around 2007, 2008, the two were very close to each other. But around this period here, 2007, 2008, companies found ways to try and minimize paying taxes. They found other means of maybe doing some corporate social investment, which is a good thing. But in so doing, the tax that come from companies dropped. And again, the tax that come from households has increased. So the burden of the revenue for our country at the moment is actually sitting in our hands as individuals. You and I are currently paying the bulk of the revenue that our government is collecting. So it is important that for that to happen, two things need to happen. We need to make sure that we create more jobs. so that more of our people can work, so that the government can collect more revenue, but also even the companies themselves, this number will also go higher as well. So the two components are very important in the collection of revenue. Obviously, other components is VAT, other levies as well, but I just wanted to focus on these two to say, companies and individuals, this combined, I think the total percentage to the total collection is about 70% or so. So that is quite high by any standard. This is just the expenditure plan for the government for the next 3 years. You will see on this chart that the bulk of the money goes to education. This is the budget which was announced in February this year by the Minister of Finance. This was before the COVID situation. So obviously these numbers now have gone higher as compared to when they were presented earlier in the year. But the point I want to raise here is that education is important, social development is important, but something that I find concerning is this debt service cost of just below 800 billion rands over a 3-year period. Now, this money, if we were not paying any debt, this money could be going into projects. We could be rolling more infrastructure for our people, and we could be benefiting more. But at the moment, we're paying interest on this money, and we need to find ways of reducing the amount of interest that we are paying. Yes, we understand the reasoning. It's good at the moment, but it's something that we need to minimize going forward. Then health, community development, and other things. So the focus should be on infrastructure development as much as possible, because that's where most of the job will be created. So we need to find ways of focusing the attention of our expenditure on infrastructure. But at the moment, because we're borrowing, the debt service cost keeps on going higher. Again, another comparison, I just want to use a scenario of comparing South Africa with other countries around the world. Now, one country that I want to use here as an example is Mexico. So the question here is, if you plot South Africa on a number line scale of 1 to 10, the question is, where would you plot South Africa in relation to other countries around the world? As I mentioned, the tax revenue have dropped. We're going to experience a deficit of 304 billion rands. The unemployment is very high. And as we all know, we experienced a downgrading by Moody and Fitch earlier in the year. And as the National Treasury has mentioned, the amount of debt is increasing. They talk about 82%, which is almost 4 trillion rands that our government is owing. Now, based on this, if you draw a number line up to 10, where would one place South Africa? And on my scale, I said that if you put Mexico at number 10, the reason I'm using Mexico as an example is that if you look at Mexico, in Mexico, there's if you read about Mexico, you'll find that they say between 2 and 10% of their revenue or their GDP is actually lost to corruption. Between 2 and 10% of their GDP is lost to corruption in Mexico. And if you speak to an entrepreneur in Mexico, you will read that they say 60% of entrepreneurs in Mexico, they believe that corruption is part of doing business. That's a very high number. 60% of Mexican entrepreneurs believe that corruption is part of doing business. And as if that is not enough, they say even the cases that goes to court, less than 20% of them end or result in guilty verdict in Mexico as compared to 90% in the US. So that's quite high. If more than 60%, more than 50% of the population of a nation believe that corruption is normal, that can't be normal. Where are the ethics in that country? Now the question then is, if Mexico is number 10 and the US and Britain are at number 1, where would South Africa be on the map? My analysis is that South Africa will be somewhere in the middle, right? And this point in the middle is what is called a fallen angel state. So if you look at the bond market and investment market, they talk about a bond that has fallen. We have been downgraded by Moody, as I've mentioned, earlier in the year. Now that downgrade, it has dropped our investment potential to below where it was before, and that state, it's called the fallen angel. So we were there, like the other nations that are able to borrow responsibly for their nations, but at the moment things have gone negative, and we are below where we should be. And this is something we need to do everything we can to try and move away from. Okay, as I move on, then the question is, how can we find solutions for this problem that we face? I attended a conference in Cape Town in 2007. The conference was for the International Heavy Haul Association. I'm actually, as Refile has mentioned, I'm sitting on the board of their local chapter. So I was part of the organizing committee for this conference. And what we did at the time is we invited a keynote speaker who was Dr. Cheryl Martin. At the time, she was a member of the World Economic Forum board. She was a board member of the World Economic Forum. And in her address at the conference, this is what she said. She said that we have 21st century technologies being managed with 20th century thinking by 19th century institutions. So we have 21st century technologies being managed with 20th century thinking by 19th century institutions. I just want you to think a bit about that, to say, here we are, we have got technologies, we have got Wi-Fi, we're connected now as we speak, we have got the smartphones, but we still have 20th century thinking and 19th century institutions. So a lot of our institutions are still far behind, and we need to find ways to rebuild these institutions so that they can come to terms with where we are technologically. And this is what was mentioned. And the point I'm making is that as we move on, how do we then go about rebuilding our institutions? We need to have a positive outlook of the future for our nations. We need to rebuild our institutions. Just like the sun is rising in the morning, let's look forward with a positive thinking to say, can't we find solution for our nation? Because this is our nation, this is things we want for ourselves, but not only ourselves, we want the same for our children, for the future of our country. So let's find solutions for our nation. Now, if you look at this diagram here, or this picture here, something we need to do in our institutions, for example, at municipalities, for a municipality to work very well, you need to have all this level of resources, engineers, technologies, technicians, laborers, and all these people working together. But the moment you remove one of them, the whole structure collapses. And this is what we want to avoid. We need to find our municipality resourced with the right people at right levels. And this is something that Dr. Allison talks about a lot, where he says that because she has been looking at municipalities and studying them for the last 15 or 20 years, she's saying that a lot of municipalities, we have lost key skills in these institutions. And that is something we need to find ways to rebuild back. For us to be able to maintain our roads, for us to be able to take care of our infrastructure, we need municipalities that are well resourced. And until that is done, we're always going to struggle. That is why this structure, as I'm showing here, has collapsed. So we need to find ways to solve that. Okay. Just a sec. Another thing I want to talk about is the project life cycle cost. I think we all know that the bulk of the life cycle cost of any infrastructure goes into maintenance. Between 60 and 80% of the life cycle cost of any asset goes to maintenance, which is why it is important to make sure that our municipalities, our SOEs, are resourced with the right people who understand the importance of maintenance. It's not only good enough to build new infrastructure. Yes, it's good to build new infrastructure, to plan it, to design and construct it, which costs between 20 and 40% of the total life cycle cost. But the bulk of the expenditure in the long term goes to maintenance. So it's important that we find the right people at right levels in our institutions. And until we do that, I think we're always going to have challenges as well. So this is very important. Vishal did mention in her article, and I think I've also said the same thing as well, that it's very interesting that maintenance at times is not being seen as being something to talk about. It's not something where people can cut a ribbon to welcome a project as they do with new infrastructure. Ministers are invited, politicians are invited when new projects are being unveiled. But when it comes to maintenance, people are not doing that. So they underestimate the importance of maintenance, but the cost of doing that is very high, and this should not be allowed. Okay. My laptop, for whatever reason, is very slow. Another thing I want to talk about is youth entrepreneurship. Mr. Issa mentioned earlier that there are opportunities in the supply of material, and I took note of that, whether it's aggregate, whether it's bitumen, and all the other material that they use. It's important that our people start having their own businesses to support SOEs, to support Sandal, among others. So we need to start encouraging our young people to form their own SMMEs. We have 4IR these days, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, agri businesses and franchises. Within this thing, we will be able to create more jobs for people. We'll be able to galvanize a lot of things that our country needs. For us to move away from this high unemployment rate of 30.1%, that can only be achieved when we take steps to try and move away from that. And one of the things we need to do is education. If you look at the stats, SA reports, you will see that they say that most of the people who are unemployed are the people who have not gone beyond matric, 30.4%. This is quarter 4 of 2019. This number would have gone high by now. And the people who are graduated from universities or University of Technology, those that are unemployed, the rate is very low. So we need to encourage our people to go to school, to study hard, and be able to create opportunities for themselves to be employed. And there's so many of those opportunities in SMEs, like I said, 4IR, and all these other areas that our people can get employment from. So we need to plant a seed to grow our whole continent. I think that's what is important. That's the message I'm trying to illustrate on this picture.